Hi, I hope everyone can hear me. Um, so sorry about this. I was going to answer that question whether you could work as a quant contractor, and you certainly can. Um, but it does need a certain profile. So obviously, if you're an expert in your field, um, you might want to consider soaking up very cutting-edge knowledge either through um, a connection to academia. So I sometimes see professors contracting for these type of roles, um, or another designated expert in a field. So the nice thing about quantitative asset management, and if you know that landscape in your specific region very well, is that it's usually very segregated in terms of work. So as long as you can shape your offer in a way that every organization understands what you will bring to the table, and it's something that is, let's say, replicable in that organization, I've certainly seen quant contractors for various things such as designing new strategies, creating applied research, creating systems or tools for trading, risk management, so all sorts of things. And usually the quants are very open about product innovation. So I would claim there's a market for this. Okay, I take one more question. I'm working as a risk manager in a commercial bank. What skill sets are required to make a shift to quant finance? Well, if I was a risk manager in a commercial bank, you would probably look to move to an organization that is offering specifically quantitative portfolio management, where they're looking for a risk manager role, so where you can build on your expertise as a risk manager, and at the same time learn about those strategies, work very closely with portfolio management, which is a natural given, because the type of risk management would change, and then make your way to a portfolio management role if that's what you try to achieve. Entrepreneur opportunity. Okay. So, okay, I try to summarize what I'm seeing here. I secured one position in DCM at one bank, but I'm afraid that if I take the position, I'll be moving away from a quantitative role. Can you give some advice on this, or your recommendations on how to approach a quantitative role? Well, first of all, congratulations on the DCM role. I'll be moving away from a quantitative role. My question would be back, what is the quantitative role that you held before, or what is the quantitative role you're aiming for? DCM is definitely a place you can start off if you're sharing a value somewhere along the value chain, if there's a quant role, and you can get involved. DCM is rather straightforward, so I would claim it does not involve a lot of quantitative input, except maybe for swap curve design and so on. But maybe taking out that quant, you should be asking yourself probably, what type of role do I want? Because sometimes, especially at a bank, quant is just a support role. So it can be anything from just a support role to a prop trading role, or something else. So it would be useful to see, what the ultimate goal is that you're trying to achieve. Okay, trader or research positions. Usually, if you are a student in finance, what the investment banks tend to do, and I see you're looking at that investment banking universe, is that they tend to have, especially in the capital markets division, there tend to be many different roles that you just cannot know as a graduate coming out of school. So what they tend to do is that the banks will hire for that capital market pool, and then try and find talent. And actually, the way it worked for me when I started out in investment banking is that we started with a class of 200 students with all sorts of different backgrounds. And over a period where we had to take the FCA accreditation for UK, and getting up to speed and learning about the products, there was mutual interviewing taking place. And because those banks will want to make sure that they get the best person for the right job. So mutual interviewing did take place, and you will want to reach out to those teams for trader or research positions, and then you can shadow or sit on those desks for 1 or 2 weeks and learn more about the business, also for you to find out whether this is a match and for the team to get to know you. And you will want to be very clear about what you're looking into, research or trading. And that would obviously be the best place to be if you're looking for quantitative trading or research position. So go for those graduate hires. I think this is a good time of the year to do so, because usually they hire for the summer. And now very soon is the time when those classes for capital market positions take place. Okay, I hope I answered that. Okay. If there's no more questions on mapping the offer, I will move on to the next topic. Because mapping the offer is really about being aware of all the different quant roles that exist. I mean, the capital markets and all the investment banks, they do very nice marketing. It's the most obvious thing that you will be faced with if you're graduating. But there are obviously also other quant roles that are interesting, but maybe not well marketed because the organizations are smaller or it's not the most obvious target. And that could also be directly in asset management on the real money side. But I've seen quant roles even with pension funds and those type of organizations. So I would then move on to having so many things on my screen. Getting the interview. Like, I think that's the hardest part. Because once you've gotten the interview, chances are you'll pass the interview with the help of CQF or with the help of Paul's books. Getting the interview, there's like lots of unwritten rules that are not where you have to do a lot of work in identifying the organization, identifying the offer. I mean, things have gotten easier with like LinkedIn. It's very easy to to just get an idea, to type on the role that you're looking for, the city you want to work in, and getting a feel for it. Some of the more junior positions, they will be on those large job sites. So you can search them through the internet, I claim. Because it doesn't cost anything for the employer to put out that offer. It does via LinkedIn, but you might want to look at other channels as well in identifying the organization, identifying opportunities that you can apply to. And I would also claim now that I'm smarter than I was at that time, that it's worthwhile going the extra mile and finding the job offer that is not the most obvious, like not the most obvious in terms of marketing to high school university students. So you might want to do a little bit of that search work yourself. The more senior you get, it's the more, I would claim, the more it gets informal in terms of finding the job or finding the offer. So either companies will employ a headhunter, and you might want to make sure that you're signed up with the relevant headhunters. Usually, like mid-sized firms work with one or two, or always the same headhunters. So if you know someone in the organization where you want to work in, let's say some hedge fund, you might want to ask a coworker or a potential coworker or someone in that organization which headhunter they're working with, to be visible at all, because that job offer will not be on the internet. And then identifying the offer. So once you have learned that there's a job out there for that quant role that you want, or for that role that you want, something that I found very useful, but I didn't know at the beginning of my career, but it gives you so much advantage, is to be able to speak to future coworkers or friends, acquaintances who are working there. If they're really helpful, you can look them up through LinkedIn. But you might go through your university network, CQF, whatever it is, and then ask about, take that person out to lunch or something, and then ask about the work. And I'm very sorry. And then something you might do as a next step, but it's not the most obvious for a graduate, is speaking to talent acquisition at the company, so HR, speaking to headhunters about potential other job offers without knowing what offer is there, and then making sure that you get referrals from people that you know, or also making sure on the other side that you're being referred, let's say, by academic tutors and people that know you and know your work from where you are right now, and that like people who have a good opinion of you, and might be able to refer you to that job and direct you into the right direction. Okay, I'm gonna look whether there are any questions on here. How do I find an entry-level job with 2 months experience, which pretty much all require experience in investment banking, asset management, quant finance? So the way it works here in France is it depends a lot on the country. So the way it works in France, I know, is that the French students who are usually right for the job market very early, but they tend to do a lot of internships, which are interesting, over a period of 2 or 6 months. And so you will, if you have very little experience, you will want to offer your work, and you're willing to work, and you're maybe you already bring something to the table from your university or from your previous experiences, and offer yourself as an intern. And as I said, it depends on the country. Sometimes it's not a super attractive salary, but that's the door, that's like the entry door, and you might want to consider that, doing internships, or proactively, if there's not an official offer, asking for internships. It happened to me that I created internships for people who asked for this and who said they wanted to experience this and that, because the only thing that the employer will have to invest is that extra work in training that person, and forming that person. But usually it's in terms of salary, it's quite interesting for companies to have interns. So if you have so little experience, that with internships, for practical reasons as well, because you might want to check out whether investment banking or asset management or that specific idea you had about quant finance is for you or not. So what would you say is an optimal way to get referrals? Doesn't matter whether we know the person really well. Well, I guess there's two answers to this. An optimal way to get referrals, obviously, if you have a good feeling with someone in your network who might be an academic tutor, who might be someone, I mean, obviously you would want to get a referral from a person who has been acting as a supervisor to you. So if you have a good relationship with that person, that's a natural person to provide a referral. But you have to ask for it. And if on leaving that internship or leaving university, you don't know yet where you want to go, you should still try and think of potential referrals that you'll need along your career. And I mean, now with LinkedIn, everything is obvious because everyone has a referral section on their profile. But before LinkedIn, it was really about, keeping that good relationship with that supervisor, with that tutor, anyone who was willing to give you a referral. And don't be shy about asking it. I mean, it doesn't need to be your best friend, but those people are there for providing this service to you. So, okay, what are some good questions to ask to find out about the work culture? Well, I think the most obvious, and CQF also did an event on this, is what does a typical day look like? Because that makes the person think about what they do, how they work, whether they work in a team, how they work in a teams, how they're organized, and so on. So ask them about a typical day, and it will also answer questions such as those that you might not dare to ask, like how many working hours there are in a week. I mean, they're obvious questions which you don't want to explicitly ask, but you want to learn about them. So in an honest exchange on a potential position, you will learn about those things if you ask about a typical day or a typical job that is being performed in that position. Oh my God. Okay. Okay, how does a candidate stand out in the application process? I think I will answer that question on getting the interview with how you could stand out as a candidate in the application process. So what you obviously want to do is that you look very closely at the job offer. And the thing about getting that interview is very often the screening is performed not by the hiring MD or not by the hiring manager. It's usually performed by HR. So state the obvious, first of all, and then try to stand out. So stating the obvious is you will want to make sure that what they put out there in terms of information about the job offer, be it formal or informal through information that you gain from talks outside of that formal job offer, is that you want to make sure that you match whatever they're looking for. And quant role is not quant role. I mean, quant role could be the leading portfolio manager for designing a new strategy, let's say in multi-asset liquid securities. But it might also be that they want a quant who is a number cruncher, who is receiving orders on what strategies to work on, and following very specific instructions. And in that case, you will want to stress different qualities if that's the job you're aiming for. So what you want to make sure is that it's matching. And it's not an easy task because sometimes you have to read between the lines. Sometimes if there's a headhunter who's promoting that role, they'll have a better idea of what they're actually looking for as an organization. So first of all, before making sure that you stand out and you just want to get the interview, make sure that it matches. And that could be simple things such as mirroring the wording of the job offer, literally. So being the best applications I have seen have very good motivation letters, which means you can actually see that it's not an AI generated motivation letter, but that you picked up the specifics of the organization and the specifics of that role, and that you're ready to match it. And then, I mean, standing out, what an interviewer is impressed by is good grades, additional certificates. So, I mean, standing out, I think, is quite obvious. But first of all, in getting the interview, you want to make sure that you tailor what you have to pass that filter, which might be HR or someone in HR who just has to place and present interviewees that make sense for that role. Okay, so I'll answer that. Can you talk about your experience about going through the CQF program? For me, the CQF program was a major challenge because my background was in business admin. My challenge was the mathematics. My challenge was the programming. Luckily, I did some computer science. I was always interested in computer science. I just had to pick it up again. But obviously familiarize myself with new programming languages and so on. So what was your prior quant experience? There was a prior quant experience, however, in portfolio management. That means implementing strategies, designing strategies, but not having done the number crunching, which was in applied research. So actually my portfolio management roles in quants were more like a structuring role, where I did everything, like where I had many touch points with other people in the organization, from defining what risk premium you would want to employ in the fund, and how to what financial instruments to use and so on, up to providing marketing support, being part of roadshows to explain the strategy and so on. So that was my prior quant experience, and I wanted to hone up on the quant skills, like the pure quant skills, modeling, different types of regression analysis, and so on. Time commitment played a role for me because prior to this, having worked in Germany, the state of the art was, if you wanted to work in quant, was having a doctor, like a PhD. And I honestly, like with my setup and my family setup and so on, I had no time to take a year or 2 or 3 or whatever off from work. So I was looking for the possibility to do this online on weekends. But it definitely, I would say in total, maybe 20 hours per week additionally. And then when it comes to the later stage of CQF, where you have to hand in original code on quant strategies, I'd like ask my husband to take care of the kids and lock myself in for a weekend. Like a proper weekend, morning to evening, to program those things. Can you share if you paid it or your employer paid for it? So by the time there was I was interested in the CQF, I was also more confident than I would have been as an undergraduate. So I actually said, to my employer, who was very generous, but the CQF actually surpassed um, what they were able to put aside by default for every portfolio manager per year. And we made a deal. We made a deal that I would commit myself to stay with that employer, that I would successfully have to pass the CQF. And until then, I took 50% of the cost and I got reimbursed after that. So there are possibilities to negotiate around that. Obviously, it helps if you're in a quant fund or that values, lifelong education and so on. It's easier to negotiate that type of things. As your CFA CQF, what helped you more to get in your current position? I'd say in my current role, which is business development, but I doubtful whether you want to do this. But in the current role, I think it was neither of them. The CQF helped very much with the last job, and the CFA helped with the previous job. Because in the end, you're being hired by someone. So we're talking getting interviews. So you're looking to be employed. And when you're being employed, there's someone choosing you, and you would want to know what the profile of that person is. Do they value a CFA or not? Some of them, I've even met hiring managers who did not value the CFA because they were like, okay, CFA is such and such a profile, but we want a number cruncher, so they would not value the CFA. They'd probably prefer the CQF. If you're looking for a role which is closer to like equity analysis, fundamental analysis, and let's say the classical portfolio management, the CFA, I think would be helpful. But what you're really looking for with the CFA CQF is also the potential, like the network. And that one point I wanted to mention also is me having worked in different countries. And I can assure you, no one in France here even knows how to pronounce my business school. It's a top business school in Germany, but the French don't acknowledge it. So it has definitely helped me to get interviews, client meetings, and so on by having a CFA or having a more serious talk with our product management, having a CQF. So you might want to look at, the regional, the reach of CFA and CQF as well. Where CQF is a more, CFA is obviously larger in terms of numbers, but it's also more widespread in terms of CQF is more focused, I'd say. I think, there was a brief answer to that. So yes, I think you can work as a freelancer, and I think you can work as an entrepreneur. If it's not as a portfolio manager directly, because in that case, become an entrepreneur, get funding, get a fund, put up a track record. Then if you want, get bought by someone or get more funding. But get it going, and you might want to work on that live track record. Other than that, you can obviously work as, let's say, a quant consultant to a quant asset manager, or an investment bank, or an insurance, or someone in risk who needs more information on quantitative models. And in that case, I would claim certification. CQF might be even more important, or as in the case that I described, a PhD, being a teaching professor. Like you would really want to stand out if you want to make yourself independent and work as a contractor. You need to work very hard on those lifelong learning skills and be able to display them, because you will constantly be there selling your services. I mean, working in a bank, I found I learned so much. But at the same time, it's very, like, everything functions. It's all like machine room. Everybody knows where they go, so it's very hierarchical. It's very well organized. It's a big machine. For someone who's young and starting out, I found that opportunity to be able in a bank super helpful because I didn't know about it. A hedge fund, I've seen so many, and actually structuring different hedge funds, because what I did in hedge fund derivative structuring was also buying or investing into those hedge funds. They're so different. It really depends on the hedge fund. It can be the work culture, remuneration, the strategies they look at, the interviews, since this is the topic of the talk, and we should probably move on also to the next chapter. Interviews have been so different. So we have been talking about getting the interview. If we move on to how to ace that interview, I once applied to a hedge fund, and I wouldn't say it's the rule, but they simply said, send us overnight 3 types of code for cash sweeping, show us your P&L on this and this and this, and that's the application. We don't need anything else. So that would be like the out of the ordinary type of application or getting the interview. And then you would also have, the conventional type of interview where you show your CV and you write a motivation letter and so on. Shall I maybe proceed on the interview? Because, okay, I'm gonna get to the questions later on. Okay, let's just touch on this. It's the main topic of the talk. So AC interview. So understanding the interview process, I've worked at 4 different employers now, different industries, and I'd say I've seen quite a fair share of what is out there. Understand the interview process, talk to the hiring manager, talk to the headhunter. They might not be, make sure that they do their job and inform you and ask questions so that you're comfortable with the interview. I've had interviews where there were assessment centers, cognitive testing. In one case, it was about parametric testing. And when I heard that, I was like, I never heard about this. It's so esoteric. And when I heard about it and informed myself about it, I found that there were books big like this, like the US SATs and so on, to prepare for it. It was about remembering numbers and stuff, like cognitive testing and, getting out the calculator and being really fast. And other things like logic and so on. Yeah, I've seen submitting code, the HR filter, so they might actually have forms and try and find out what your profile is. Team filters and research filters. So why did I put filter in there? Just try and be aware that different people in the process different people in the process have a say in whether to hire you or not, and be aware of the stages that you're at. So as I said in the beginning, you tend to have the HR filter. That's their job. They need to make sure that only the relevant candidates are invited. And you will see them time and again throughout the interview process. Make sure that you're clear and concise and friendly and everything with HR. They need to be your friends. They might be the ones who propose you for new jobs in case this interview doesn't work out. Then you have the team filter. This is super cool. I completely ignored this early in my career, but I found that so important. Be aware that usually you're being hired to a team. So that's your microcosmos where you find yourself in that new role. And be aware of the team dynamics. It's exaggerating a bit, but you should, if you can, find out who's the head of the team, what are the roles of the different team members, and how could you speak to each one of them? Because especially in quant finance, as I said, there's a lot of different silos or a repetition of work. Some are more programmers, they have a different way of communicating. Some are, the structures or the product designers close to sales, they might have a different way. and different preferences, and so on and so on. So there's a team filter, and then there might be a research filter for a hardcore quant role, such as they might want to screen papers you wrote, if you wrote papers, and ask questions about that, or they might want to hire you to write a paper. So be prepared for that. Prepare the interview through available resources. So all that inside information, I mean, obviously it's difficult to get. You should still take that interview if you don't get all of that information. But if you can, it will give you an advantage, and it might completely change the game. So, I mean, there are forums like Glassdoor and those kind of things where you find out how you could prepare. However, do not pay too much attention to it, because it might be biased also a little bit. Future colleagues, Wilmot forum, I mean, any type of forum, Quant, you know that there are forums that have to do with coding, but you might also find through specific forums that there are opinions on potential employers, how to nail that interview and so on. Just want to make sure that I'm not missing something. Ace the interview, prepare the interview through available resources. I once bought that book, to be honest, at the airport, because it's sort of, it's like popular quant knowledge written by Paul Wilmot, and it's on acing the quant interview without further marketing or further commercial breaks we have here. I looked at that interview book just to be prepared for potential questions, and that could be also, there's also books on common brain teasers, just to get yourself comfortable, if you know that there's a certain structure to that interview, so you know what to expect. Yeah, and then I put something here which might not be the most obvious, so I might need to explain it. Which attitude is needed for which role? So you might want to understand through previous talks to peers or future colleagues, what exactly are they looking for? So what is behind the job description? Because the job description and getting the interview you passed now, but what might there be hidden information? I mean, are they just looking for a cheap analyst to perform the job because someone else left or something? Or are they looking for that next level of knowledge, and they're able, to put up a lot of money for this new role? So what is the hidden information that is definitely not in the job description? If you can get your hands on that, super useful. What quant questions to expect? Go to the CQF forums. And what other questions to expect about team integration experience, corporate culture, career expectations. Do not forget that the interview is also for you. It's happens. I didn't have a whole lot of interviews, but some of the interviews that I had, which I would say were they were successful in terms of nailing all the questions. They gave me an idea about the culture, and sometimes I was like, actually, I don't want to work here because it's not the culture, or it's not the thing that I'm looking for. And be very sure yourself also about career expectations. Sometimes they will tell you straight up front what career expectations you can have, but if not, and you're aiming to a certain career level, ask what is the perspective in this role. If the role that you're applying for and that you're sitting in the interview is not the role that you're aiming for, ask. And sometimes you can refer back to that initial interview, saying, well, you wanted to make me, team head after 3 or 5 years or whatever. So this is the time to ask those questions, and to make sure that you don't waste, years of your life on a job that you actually do not want. So this is the time to find out. And I think it's the best way to ask them straight up front in the interview. Try to not be too desperate to take any job. Just be authentic and genuine. And if they feel they have seen your questions and you make a genuine impression, I think everyone will appreciate it. When I came from uni, I didn't pay a lot of attention to it, but I also saw it's a point in your polls, the follow-up. The follow-up can be decisive in your career. So I totally ignored that when I was younger. But yeah, with more experience, I actually appreciate that you should spend time on the follow-up if you're genuinely interested in that job. First of all, say thank you. Always say thank you. Doesn't hurt. It's like etiquette. It protects you. It's building bridges. It's making sure that you can continue on some level. And how often does it happen that you don't get that role, but in 6 months' time they call you for another role because they liked you, they genuinely liked you, HR retained your profile, and they found something that is more fitting. So do say thank you. Not saying thank you hurts. It doesn't cost anything. Follow up and express interest, obviously. And you obviously want to know when they get feedback and where they are. This is usually where you find out how far they are in the selection process. And sometimes you might be candidate number 2, right? If candidate number 1 got the offer but is declining, you might find out about that sort of situation when you're asking for feedback, which would be, how did you find, the interview, and where are you in the process? When can I hear you back? When can I hear back from you? And I think the other thing that I wanted to say with asking for feedback and maintaining that relationship is, let's say you didn't get that job, and you feel awful about yourself. Try and be confident enough to ask for honest feedback. I mean, they are usually appreciative of your time that you spend on them. They also spend time on it. And usually the hiring manager is very happy to provide feedback. And that feedback could be a turning point in your career, because they will, they have nothing to lose. So this is the best time to get feedback on how you're being perceived by them. This can contain very valuable information. And then I guess last chapter is lifelong learning. When I started out, I was looking for that straightforward CV, staying for the perfect amount of time with that asset manager, and after the perfect amount of time changing to the next one. That's how you imagine your career going. Or if you're starting out in investment banking, you obviously you want to go from analyst to MD or whatever. But from time to time, be honest about yourself, what you're good at, what you're interested in. You need to be definitely passionate about what you're doing, what you're interested in, and whether you see yourself like 5 years from now still in the same position, the same industry, the same career path, because trading, structuring, and sales is not the same thing. It's quite different choices. Invest in lifelong learning to make sure, to assure long-term happiness. And also plan ahead of time. Now I'm like, I just turned 40 last year. I have a small family, and that was obviously not the thing when I came from university. You don't think about that, but you have to align your life vision as well with the career path you're choosing, which will have implications on working hours. Are you internationally flexible or not? So consider all those things, because the career has to match your life and not the other way around. And I think I leave it at that. And Christian, if you want to pick up some questions, and I'm happy to answer 2 or 3 before we wrap up. Well, as I said, I mean, you might not want to end up as a business developer, but in my case, it has not been so important to be super strong in one coding language. And I mean, when I coded back in the days, and I even did like coding competitions in computer science because in high school I was interested in coding. I did C sharp. C sharp is like the mother, the mother of all that new coding. And when I look at Python or R, I mean, obviously Python compared to R, both of them are built on the back of C. But it has become so easy to learn coding and pick it up. So what I would just be aware of is that something you enjoy. Is that something you're good at? Is that something you want to refine, like someone who plays piano or something? So if that's your passion, go down that coding route. Learn the languages that you're passionate about. Especially in CQF when I was doing it, but I know the course is evolving. We learned about the differences in R and Python solving the same problem, just nuances. Um, and I think, I mean, obviously, if you want to be an quant, you should have an affinity for coding. But if you or if you have a preferred coding language, it's not an obstacle. Like, there's some companies who take it very lightly. There are other companies, like when I was at my last employer, who was very quant. Even the sales got training and coding and SQL, so it was very open architecture. And if you're coding, it always helps. But I think the basics are SQL, and then a language to manipulate data and build strategies and so on. And then have fun with it, like with Shiny app or whatever. But I should mention this one thing. When I was involved with hiring quants onto our team and we wanted someone with hardcore coding skills, it was very easy to detect. Was it like a first level coder or an experienced coder or someone who is wasting our time? So be aware of where you are and whether you want to be really good at that, and then be consistent and try and hone your skills in whatever language that is. I think making that transition from one programming language to another is not that difficult, but good coding can be can it's very easy to make that difference between just looking at the code between good coding and bad coding. And some of the questions I'd asked was like about how to improve code and so on. So there are some rules, I guess, in coding, which are general rules and that you should respect and like as a coder. But I guess the more frequently you code, the better you get. Yeah. And maybe one last thing, because it's about the quant interview. So if you're interviewing, you probably integrate your code or whatever you bring into a team. So good coding skills. And I wouldn't say this is part of the CQF. This is something broader you learn elsewhere, or you just apply it. Is good coding. Can I call it etiquette or conduct? Because you want that team to be capable of integrating that code into their work processes. And I've seen good code, and I've seen horrible code, and sometimes someone who was good or fast in coding and who wrote many lines was not the most useful person to have on the team, because that code was messy, wasted everyone's time, and when something needed fixing, it was a pain in the neck. So there's the different definitions of good coding, but think of the consumer of your coding, especially if you're integrating into a quant team.